This episode is sponsored by Bring Her Back, one of my absolute favourite movies of the year. The new film from the Philippou brothers about a brother and sister who uncover a terrifying ritual at the secluded home of their new foster mother, played by Sally Hawkins in one of the best performances of the year. Rated 18, Bring Her Back is available to buy or rent on your favourite digital stores like Apple TV Plus, Amazon Prime and Sky Store. Welcome back to the evolution of horror. My name is Mike Muncer, and as ever, I am your host. We're bringing you a little bonus episode this week. It's a 28 days/weeks/years special. Obviously, one of the biggest films of the year, 28 Years Later, came out a few months ago. It is now available to buy and watch at home. We've got The Bone Temple coming out in a couple of months' time as well. The trailer for that dropped just last week. So why not go back and revisit the original trilogy? It's been a while since we talked about 28 Days and Weeks Later, so me and my guest Becky Dark are about to talk about the whole trilogy in spoilerific detail. We will be talking about 28 Days Later from 2002, also available to buy and watch at home, about 28 Weeks Later from 2007, and 28 Years Later from earlier this year. We will then finish with a few speculations and predictions and thoughts on the upcoming 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, directed by Nia DaCosta. So please enjoy my conversation with Becky Dark about 28 days/weeks/years later. Hello, Becky Dark.
Hello, Mike Muncer. How are you?
Hello. I'm good, thank you. I'm good. I'm excited to get stuck into these films with you. How long has it been since you last revisited 28 Days and Weeks Later?
Longer than I thought it had been. Mm-hmm. So this is where LETTERBOXD comes into the equation for me, because my brain doesn't work, and so I have my backup brain, which is LETTERBOXD. And I would have assumed that I'd seen 28 Days Later a lot more recently than I had, but it had been like 2019, so it's been about 6 years, which surprised me. And Weeks I haven't seen since I saw it at the cinema, so that has been even longer.
Yeah, I think both of them for me was 2019 as well, and that was when I was doing the zombie series on this podcast. So
I reckon I probably watched 28 Days Later.
Along.
How cute!
That is cute, because the first time you were on the proper podcast was the zombie series,
it was
right?
Zombies,
that was your first episode, was Serpent and the Rainbow, right?
That's right. So I was probably like, I suppose I better listen to this podcast that I've never heard of.
Exactly. You're like, better do my homework, listen to all the episodes, watch the films. Yeah. So yeah, it's exciting. It's nice to be able to revisit them. What's your kind of relationship with the original movie, with 28 Days Later? Like, do you have are you a fan of it? And like, did you see it back in the day when it first came out, when there was all that hype?
Absolutely, yeah, massive fan, and saw it straight away. So yeah, I was kind of in from day one. From when the rage virus hit, I was there. I was patient zero.
Yes.
I was that angry chimp in the lab.
Yeah, you were the chimp.
Yeah, I've always really, really loved 28 Days Later, and I think it did something so kind of fresh at the time, and like now looking back, I think it's had so much influence on kind of all the like zombie rage virus movies, etc., that have come. Yeah, the kind of fast moving rage zombies. Exactly. Right? But at the time it felt like so different, and I think, you know, as horror fans, we often say this, but you're always kind of chasing that, like, something that actually genuinely scares you. And one of the things that I loved so much about 28 Days Later when it first came out was it scared the shit out of me.
I mean, I think it is. It's not a hot take to say it's the scariest zombie movie ever made, I would say. Like, I don't think there are many zombie movies that are more maybe apart from Wreck, actually, that have more like absolute sheer terror from beginning to end, right?
Absolutely.
Incredible. But Wreck, I feel like Wreck wouldn't have happened without 28 Days Later. So, there's that. I think 28 Days Later is, like you say, it's so important. It was the first of its kind. Let's talk a little bit about it. We should, and I want to sort of go through it sort of vaguely from beginning to end. But first of all, just starting with Alex Garland and Danny Boyle, who kind of created this whole world. Alex Garland had the initial idea. He wanted to make something, he said, that kind of was a mix. It took inspiration from Night of the Living Dead, but also Day of the Triffids, but that idea of kind of a virus or something wiping out the UK. Obviously, Alex Garland since has become a filmmaking legend in his own right? What do you think of Alex Garland and his writing, I suppose, and the way he kind of builds worlds and tells stories?
I think he's remarkable. He's got such a... He seems to have such a literacy around horror, but even more than that, like, he's got that kind of sci-fi bent on so much of what he does. So if you're thinking about, 28 Days Later is an example of that. Like, it's so grounded in the kind of the science of it, right? Yeah. This isn't zombies from the occult or anything like that. Like, this comes from a lab, and that is so clear from, the outset of this film and this franchise. But even if you're thinking about stuff like Ex Machina, he's got this kind of view on the world, I think, that is very grounded in the more scientific sci-fi side of things, but also has this kind of like fantastical element to it. So if you think about something like Men, is so odd, but then, like Civil War as well is grounded, but there's always this kind of element of otherworldliness. Yeah. And I don't really know a better way of putting it than that, but he just has this, for me, he has such a unique way of telling stories and kind of getting these very like complex themes and thoughts like onto the screen, but in this really like genuinely like accessible and entertaining way. I think he's remarkable. I'm a fan.
I love him. Famously quite grumpy.
Love a grumpy man.
He's so grumpy. Very nice, but quite grumpy. Last time I interviewed him for 28 Years Later, he was talking about what a relief it was to not be directing a film, and just be writing something. I think he really doesn't like directing very much, but he's so good at it.
He's so good at it. I know.
He's so good at it. So no one wants him to stop. But I think he really fell out of love with it for a while, particularly after, I think maybe after Civil War, or during Civil War. I think he found that quite a stressful time making that. But yeah, I think he's remarkable as well. And I love his partnerships with Danny Boyle. Yeah. Obviously, they had done The Beach together previously to this, which was a tricky, troubled production. Danny Boyle didn't like that the studio interfered and things were changed and everything. But generally speaking, I think that they work quite well together, because Alex Garland is quite, when you watch his films even, they're quite slow and pensive and thought-provoking, and then Danny Boyle is the polar opposite. It's like boom, boom, boom. Like everything looks like everything is like a kinetic music video with montages and all these kind of weird camera tricks and techniques and everything. And I actually think they complement each other really well in that regard.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, The Beach. Like, The Beach is one of my favourite ever books.
Right. And how did you find the film adaptation then? Because I know that was not a lot of people loved that film. Right?
Yeah, I don't love it.
No.
I think it has its moments, and I think that there are bits of the book that it captures really well, and bits that it doesn't. But Alex Garland wrote a book called The Tesseract as well, which is so good. Like, huge recommend for that.
Ooh, okay.
So yeah, like I think on the page, I think, whether that is in books or on, in screenplays and behind the camera, I think he's remarkable. But yeah, exactly as you say, that like complementary relationship that he has with Danny Boyle has created some of the most like like frenetic, but also kind of thought-provoking stuff that you see on screen. And that is such a, like, I don't know, that feels like quite a special thing.
There's that beautifully quick economic setup, which is an opening scene. We've got some angry chimps. We have a scientist played by David Schneider, I think, right? Talking about how, love David Schneider, talking about how they've been infected with something called rage, right? And then we get these animal activists that let them out, boom, dead. That's it, 28 days later. I should acknowledge and ask you, what are your thoughts on the discourse as to whether this is or isn't a zombie film? Because it's a virus, right, as it's set up in the beginning.
I mean, fine. Okay, fine. They're not zombies because what's a zombie, right? It's something that has been brought back to life to feed on the flesh of the living or whatever.
But even that is debatable, right? If you go back to Haiti and you know, I walked with a zombie and that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Absolutely. But even, I guess, with that, like, then you have kind of a zombie master.
Yes, true.
Who is sort of pulling the strings behind the scenes and, you know, sending their zombies off on little missions whatever.
That's right.
So, yeah, I mean, you know, I get it. I understand the argument. Of course I do, that 28 days later, they're not zombies. But also, like, grow up. Obviously, they're zombies. Like, fine, semantics, whatever. This is a zombie film. Can we just move on?
I love that. Because I think Danny Boyle for years insisted it wasn't a zombie film. So I love the idea that you're telling Danny Boyle to grow up. Grow up, Danny. You know.
Sorry, Danny Boyle. No offense, men. But I think, you know, 28 days later, we're now, 28 years later, and we're in 2025 and all of this. And I'm like, can everybody just calm down?
Absolutely. And I think and I've just written extensively about zombies, and I think the thing that they all have in common, no matter what iteration, is that it's also about losing your sort of humanity and free will, right? And you are in some way enslaved by, it could be by a master, it could be by just this like insatiable hunger for flesh, or it could be, in the case of this, just this insatiable rage. And desire to tear anything alive apart.
It's so,
right?
This is what's so scary, is that just, and the turn is so quick.
Everything
I think
happens quickly.
That's what that's one of the things that really stood out to me on this rewatch was, God, it is so quick. And I know that in weeks they make a real thing of that. They've like worked out, and so you have to take them down within like this amount of time. But even in days, they're aware of that. It's like there's no waiting around to see if somebody is going to be okay. It's just
there's
like,
none of that. Like one person is like been bitten, but they're covering it up for most of the film.
And I love that. I love that. It's like, no, you've got it in your mouth or your eye, or you've been bitten. And it's just like, you've just got to take them down immediately. And I find that so scary. And there's something about the transformation as well, like the way that the infected move, that kind of jerky, twitchy,
oh my God,
like body movement that they have, that spray of blood that immediately just like evacuates itself from their bodies is, it is different to what we had seen in zombie movies before,
completely.
Which it seemed slower. You're waiting to see, like, were they bitten, or what's going to happen with this. But it's like no, like that's it, they're gone, and immediately, like you say about sort of being enslaved to this rage, which is obviously how it kind of manifests itself. That is just so scary, because you're right, it's just immediate rage, fury, violence, killer, like that's it. You're just tearing everything around you apart.
Because they don't necessarily eat people, or do they?
No, they don't seem
It's more that you just, like you say, you just tear each other apart, essentially, right?
Because
maybe they do eat. I mean, we'll get to that in 28 years later, but maybe they are eating people by then. I don't know. But
because you get this thing, don't you, about, and again, I think this is at the beginning of Weeks, when it sort of gives you a bit of a timeline breakdown, and it says something like after a certain amount of time, the infected like starved, right? They sort of all died because they starved to death. And so you do sort of think like, okay, well, yeah, they're not like eating food because they're not like going down the supermarket because they've got rage to do, right? Then we've got other plans.
Got rage to do, exactly.
Other priorities. Exactly. I've got rage to do right now.
Absolutely.
So they're not like eating. And I guess if you're not eating people, that's it. Like you just fade away. You waste away, right?
So let's talk about that incredible first act where 28 days later, the world has ended, and then Cillian Murphy were introduced to wakes up. Cillian Murphy, by the way, what a guy, right? Incredible.
So
I think this is the first time probably the first time for many of us, we saw him in something, right? And
yeah, I think so.
Lying naked in his hospital bed, first time we see him. Yeah,
I know.
And obviously, this is the iconic section of the film where he wakes up in an abandoned hospital. That's very Day of the Triffids, and then wanders around an abandoned London. Those scenes, right, still unbelievably powerful.
Unbelievably powerful. And I think it's interesting what you said about Alex Garland, like wanting it to be kind of like Day of the Triffids and being set in the UK and this infection raging through the UK. I think that had quite an effect on me as a younger viewer as well, like watching it, like, holy shit, like I recognize all of these places. And I think for UK viewers specifically, that was really powerful. And it was this like fast filmmaking process to make sure that, you know, they were kind of capturing it while they could. Like logistically, it was really difficult. At the time, we didn't know any of that. We didn't, you know, unless you're kind of reading sort of big sort of deep dives in film magazines. But if you just turn up to the film and you watch it, it's like, how the hell have they done this? Well,
let's talk a little bit more, because I still think there are some people that don't know about that. Like you said, they closed off certain streets. They had to film it at the exact moment in time that was like 4:40 or something a.m. Because it was the exact right light where it was dawn, you know, the sun was up, and I think it was kind of late August, early September that they were filming a lot of this stuff. Because actually, Danny Boyle has talked about 9/11 literally happened while they were filming this movie.
Right,
so September the 11th, 2001. So they were filming at this specific time of day when London would be as empty as possible. And like you said, they were able to Westminster Council were able to let them close off certain streets, or Westminster Bridge or Piccadilly Circus. But for literally, like you say, about 9 minutes or 10 minutes at a time. Yeah. And then they had to reopen and let the traffic go through. And so because of that, again, it fits the pacing of this movie perfectly. They had to be super fucking quick all the time. And so part of the getting around that was that Danny Boyle had to find a really cheap camera that would be very portable, that didn't require a lot of setting up a shot and the lighting and big rigs. Of course. So everything was filmed on this kind of digital mini DV camera. This was the kind of dawn of digital video, you know, films, wasn't it? And my God, like you could, when you watch it now, I mean, Danny Boyle again has talked about this himself. He's like, I can't believe we got away with a film that looks that bad in quality. Like, it looks hilariously, it looks like found footage now when you watch it, I think. Like
it does. I thought that immediately when you said, you know, that Rec wouldn't have existed without 28 Days Later. And, it, you know, 28 Days Later isn't a found footage film and Rec is, but even visually, there's like a kind of crossover or a comparison there, right?
Yeah.
That grainy, just kind of like the muted colour. But for me, like, because I know that there are people who like actually find it quite difficult to watch because it looks so bad.
Yes.
But for me, like that just adds to the whole thing. It 100%. Adds to that like post-apocalyptic feel of it. Mm-hmm. It adds to, I think, the realism. You know, it's not super glossy. Mm-hmm. And also there's part of me that sort of thinks like, well, if people made movies like after the apocalypse had happened, this is kind of what they'd look like.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah,
you're just doing it on like these little handhelds or, whatever you can kind of scavenge from a tip is what it feels like.
Well, totally. And I think, there is something, whether deliberately or not, there is something that really captures that era and that mood. Because again, it wasn't made as a post 9/11 film. But if you think of the video footage of people on the streets of New York,
Mike.
that is exactly what it looked like, right? Because people at the time were filming through their, pretty crappy camera phones in 2001 or using like digital video cameras to capture what was happening in New York on that day. And that is what it looks like, right? It's crazy.
Yeah, it's some weird, I don't know, just like it gives me a bit of a chill actually that was happening at the same time as this film was being made, because there are so many weird
parallels.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree. And also I suppose that's the other thing about watching it now through a 2025 lens, post-COVID as well. Because I suppose the other thing is that we have actually seen images of London now like that, right? During that first lockdown, do you remember, like, what was that, late March 2020? We've actually seen London like that now, haven't we? So that it adds an extra layer of kind of, I don't know, chill, I suppose, to those images.
My husband Dave works in Westminster. He's a civil servant. And when people were first sort of allowed to start going back into the office if you wanted to, and the point was not a lot of people wanted to.
No. My
husband was like, I want to go in, like, that whole kind of stir crazy thing. And he cycles to work. And so he cycled to Westminster on one of those first days, or like during that first sort of couple of weeks that you were basically allowed to. And he came back, and I remember so vividly, he said, it looks like 28 days later.
Wow.
Because it's literally like there, like that exact location is, he's going past the Houses of Parliament and all of that kind of thing, and he was like, it was weird.
God, it's crazy. It is. It's some of the most brilliant stuff that stood the test of time, I think, in this movie. It's the stuff everyone remembers, don't they, from 28 Days Later? You think of Cillian Murphy walking across Westminster Bridge.
And that repeating motif that then goes throughout the entire movie, this hello, right? He's just, and it sort of gets more and more desperate. So at first he's in the hospital and he's just sort of calling down the corridors. Then he is sort of shouting it out on the streets. Then he goes into the church and says... That was
the bit that terrified me the most, the church.
Absolutely terrifying. And he says, like, hello, because, he can kind of see all the bodies, and he's like, I don't know, he's checking to see if anybody's alive, or he doesn't know what the fuck he's checking, right? He's just like this one word, just hello. Like, it's this kind of reaching out to somebody, right? It's how you greet people. It's how you ask if there's anybody around, like, who speaks my language. And obviously it sort of becomes this more and more desperate and then more and more dangerous, word as it kind of goes on. And then obviously lovely at the end. I love all this kind of shit. These things that sort of like call back with the big sign at the end that just says hello. And that's like essentially like the last shot of the film when they're trying to signal the fighter planes and stuff. Like, it's so good.
It's so lovely, I know. So what do you think of the characters that we're introduced to throughout this movie? So we've got Cillian Murphy, and then he bumps into Naomi Harris, right, who kind of sticks with him throughout the movie. And then you're introduced to Brendan Gleeson as Frank and his daughter Hannah, right? And first of all, what do you think of that kind of group that we're introduced to in the first half of the film?
So good. I think that they have very cleverly written just such a... For like four people, they're quite like a nice diverse mix of kind of personalities and age groups and dispositions and experience and, all of that kind of stuff. So obviously you've got Cillian Murphy, who comes in as, he's essentially the audience proxy. He's just woken up from a coma. He has no fucking clue what's happened. You've got Naomi Harris, who is much more kind of world weary about the whole thing, even after...
And she explains to to us everything, doesn't she?
She kind of breaks it down. And then you've got Brendan Gleeson and, sorry, I don't know the actress's name who plays Hannah.
No, it's Megan Burns, apparently.
Megan Burns, who have kind of, like, they're the little family unit, and they have kind of holed themselves up in their council flat.
Yeah.
And, then this sort of brings in this element of hope. And you see that so clearly, like, through Naomi Harris's character, when she's so immediately hardened to the world around her through this, like, survival that she's had to go through through the last few weeks. And then you get, like, Frank and Hannah kind of bringing this kind of softness, I guess. And, like, Frank, particularly, a personal favourite of mine. Like,
Brendan Gleeson.
I love him so much, and it makes me really sad when he dies.
Yeah, there is a short section of this film where you go, oh, this is quite nice. They're like a little makeshift family. They're looking at horses in fields. Oh, they go shopping. There's a lovely supermarket
incredible
sequence.
Supermarket scene.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, this is nice. And then it all comes crashing down very quickly, doesn't it? Yeah, Brendan Gleeson, that incredible, like you mentioned already, the speed in which people transform and are infected. And that is really shown in real time, isn't it, with Brendan Gleeson, where a drop of blood from a crow, is it a crow? I mean, I'm not going to ask you about birds, Becky, but
Mike, you're correct. It is a crow.
Okay, thank you.
Now, as we have discussed before, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to go into the crow chat right now. But yeah, because it's like pecking at a body or something, isn't it? And he looks up, and it's so sad as well, because at that moment, Frank has, like, lost his hope.
Yeah.
You know, he really has kind of, especially for his daughter, he's been this kind of, like, almost like cheerful, cheeky, chappy, like he's a cabbie and, all of this kind of thing. Brendan Gleeson doing a sterling effort at a London accent.
Yeah.
And then obviously, like, they are looking for the outpost, right? Because they've been hearing the broadcast. And so they're looking for the army outpost, and they get there and it's not there. And he just loses it, right? Like, all of that kind of hope that he has been holding on to so hard for himself and for Hannah just goes. And it's so sad that it's in that moment of despair for him that, like, he dies, because I don't know, that, like, you sort of think, like, oh, it's so sad that, like, Hannah is going to kind of remember him partly that way and stuff. Like, it's, again, just remarkable writing.
So good. And then the story really shifts. And this is sometimes where people have different opinions on where this story goes, I think, because it stops being, in a way, a kind of zombie apocalypse on the run movie. And we get to the second half where they get up north to Manchester, and then they find what appears to be kind of safety and protection from this kind of army group in this kind of barracks, right, led by Christopher Eccleston as Major Henry West. But then things get, like, really bleak and nasty and sort of rapey, don't they? How do you find the way in which the story shifts in the second half?
I don't love the sort of rapey bit, if I'm honest. I think, to be honest, it does lose me a little bit.
Yeah.
And as I say, I hadn't seen it in like 5 or 6 years. And I'd forgotten that it kind of is like the second half of the movie.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten
it's a 2-hour movie, actually.
Right.
And so, yeah, you're right. It is essentially like a good chunk of the second hour is this.
It really is. And I think I'd I'd definitely forgotten that. I don't think I had recalled, like, how long we spent with the soldiers. And for me, certainly on this rewatch, like, it dragged a little bit. I was like, we're spending a lot of time with these blokes.
Yeah, the pacing really slows down.
Really slows.
And I think it does something similarly, but possibly more successfully, in my opinion, in years, actually, which we'll get to. The way in which in the second half it sort of grinds to a halt, pacing-wise. But this is something that they've done in both movies. But yeah, I agree with you. I think I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the writing or something, but it's not quite as interesting as the character stuff and the drama that we get in the first half.
I think that's it. I think in some ways it becomes a bit more like archetypal.
Yeah.
Kind of, end of the world. Oh, actually, the monsters are really the people thing, which, is fine. And I think that is always a really important element to look at in these films. I think I'd forgotten quite how long that bit goes on. And, there are a couple of the soldier characters, like the really cockney one who just sort of,
Yeah, exactly.
It's like
a little bit broad stroke, aren't
it's
they?
a little bit broad strokes.
Yeah.
But saying that, once it picks up again and you've got the storm and Killian is out, he's kind of escaped from the soldiers.
Yeah.
And he's like going around like doing the siren. And I mean, part of me finds it a little bit, I have to suspend my disbelief a little bit in this, because I'm like literally a few days ago, he was waking up from a coma and now he's basically like a Navy SEAL. How has this happened?
Yeah, it's true.
Like, he's had one good meal and he's like running around, and like these are trained soldiers and he's single-handedly
That's true.
going through. I'm like, how has this happened? But he's got to save the girls, hasn't he? So it's fine.
There's Private Mailer, who is the one that's tied up and infected in the back as well, who they let loose as well. And it does get really exciting in that final climax,
it's really exciting.
And the way
again,
in which
like the
Cillian Murphy, the way in which he, like you say, he suddenly becomes like Commando. But there's also something about him that he resembles an infected, doesn't he? Like he is running around like a mad, violent thing in that final section as well.
Well, because it's not only infected people who get full of rage, Mike.
It's men. It's men in a toxic male environment.
Bloody men.
Right, as Alex Garland would go on to explore.
Yeah, exactly.
Bloody men.
But yeah, I mean, that part of the film where they are essentially revealing why they've been putting out this call, because he promised the men women, right? I promised them women.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So this idea that like their morale was so low and, they were all thinking about killing themselves. So I promised to bring them some women to shag. Like, all right, classic.
It's really disturbing how they like drug Hannah and they put her in a dress and stuff as well.
Disturbing. Naomi Harris is so incredible in those scenes with Hannah, where she kisses the soldier to say, like, you just leave me alone with her. It's just polite.
Yeah.
Like, you can't, it's not polite for us to get into these pretty dresses that you want us to wear if you're in the room. And so she sort of gets them out of the room, and then immediately she's like, I'm just going to give you something so that you don't care.
Yeah.
And that is so horrible.
Really grim.
Absolutely grim.
Yeah.
And then, but obviously they aren't sexually assaulted, thank God.
No.
But it kind of becomes this slightly like funny bit with Hannah where she's then like stoned
off her face. Yeah.
Off her face.
Yeah.
And then obviously that sort of leads up to the bit where Cillian Murphy comes in, and as you say, he's trying to save these women, and he's full of rage, blah, 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 blah. He's like soaked to the skin. In fact, he's just in his skin because he's got his top off and all of that kind of thing. And Hannah like basically is stoned, and she comes to like machete him, doesn't she? Because she thinks that he's eating Naomi Harris, but he's not. He's kissing her.
Yeah. And so finally then, and it is revealed in this final act via the army guys, that this hasn't happened to the entire world, right? The whole globe hasn't been wiped out. It's just the UK, and that they've been quarantined in, essentially. Like the rest of the world has just left Britain to to die, essentially, right? And so to stop the infection from spreading, which again is quite a horrifying concept. And again, I think kind of is really interestingly explored in years.
Let's talk about Brexit.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about Brexit. So yeah, I think so it ends on a kind of somewhat hopeful note in that Cillian Murphy and Naomi Harris and the little girl Hannah have survived, and they know that there is civilization out there, right? And so, like you said, that we get that lovely final shot where they're spelling out the word hello, and we see a plane flying overhead, right? And we don't know what happens beyond that, but hopefully they all live happily ever after, right?
Yeah, I'm sure they're fine.
I'm sure they're fine. We are going to see Cillian Murphy at some point in these new movies, so maybe the next one. He is coming back, so it'll be interesting to see.
I want to ask you about that.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm a bit. Yeah.
Okay. We'll get to that. So there you go. 28 days later, an absolute classic, right, of the genre. It will always be regarded, I think, as such a giant milestone, I think, in horror and especially in zombie films.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do, I know that I've said that on this most recent watch, a couple of the elements didn't quite work for me as well as I remembered. I think maybe in my head it had been, or maybe just the way that I watch films has changed a little bit since it first came out. That's that's fine, right? But I do think, despite the fact that it looks pretty janky now. Yeah. I mean, it looked pretty janky then, so it looks pretty janky now. Yeah. I think it stands up remarkably, and I think it is one of those films that, based on all of the shit that has happened since it was first made, it is one of those horror films that almost is worth a watch now, to watch it in that new context, against kind of all of that new backdrop that we now have. Yeah. It's picked up new kind of
to the point where it's become a frame of reference. Like you said, your husband saying it's like 28 Days Later out there. Like it's now become so kind of part of the culture that we will cite it.
It's a shorthand almost.
It's a shorthand. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So there you go. So that's 28 Days Later, which is available to buy and watch at home right now. So let's talk briefly about 28 Weeks Later, the kind of forgotten sequel, the forgotten middle child, right? From 2007, which obviously broadens the story. We don't really get any, recurring characters from the first movie here. It's directed by somebody different, Juan Carlos Fresnadillo, written by somebody else. So there's no Alex Garland, Danny Boyle involvement really in this. I think they're exec producers and they kind of help develop it, but they're not really directly involved. And this is a much bigger film, isn't it? And again, I guess you could talk about it in the sense of, if 28 Days Later is Night of the Living Dead, which is kind of small and contained and scary, 28 Weeks Later is like Dawn of the Dead, where things get a bit bigger and more bombastic and more action and more characters and that kind of thing, and slightly maybe less horror and a bit more action and other stuff as well. Yeah. What I'm so intrigued to hear, what was your experience of revisiting this movie for the first time in 18 years? I guess. Yeah.
I hated this movie when it first came out. I hate it. Yeah, no. Bear with me. We're coming. Yeah. When it first came out, it made me so cross. I was like, oh, I see. So what we've done is we've created one of the best short horror films that I've ever seen, and then tacked a terrible feature onto the back end of it, is essentially what's happened here.
You're alluding to the amazing opening sequence of
Unbelievable.
This film. Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I think maybe that was almost to its detriment, because I came off the back of 28 Days Later and having loved it so hard. And then you get that unbelievably good opening sequence of 28 Weeks Later. And I was like, holy shit. We are in for a treat. And then for me, at the time, certainly, it just tailed off, completely lost me. And I haven't watched it again until t'other day. And I have to say that I had a much better time with it.
Oh, good.
I think my expectations were through the floor. And so I was sort of ready to be pleasantly surprised. And I was. I still think it's got its faults. I think it's the weakest of the trilogy so far. But I thought that it actually had a lot more going for it than I initially experienced when I first watched it at the cinema.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. I go through, I've probably seen it 3 times now in my life. Like you said, first 2007 when it first came out. I saw it when I covered it on the podcast in 2019, and I've rewatched it recently for this. And every time I go through the same journey, which is, oh my God, what an astonishing opening scene. This film is going to be better than I think it is. And for a while it is. And I think there is some really good stuff in the first sort of 45 minutes, really. I quite like the world building. I quite like, okay, the military have come in and here's how this works, and we get to see, Canary Wharf, and here's what's going on over here.
They're on the DLR!
Yeah, they're on the DLR, and I genuinely do quite like that it's got a bit of a bigger budget, and we get to see a bit more of this world and what it looks like and everything. But I think you're right. I think in the eventually... Maybe this is a trend across this whole trilogy, but something loses itself in the second half, and it just kind of slightly gets a bit repetitive and glacial after a while, doesn't it?
I think basically, and when the kids get to the house and they find their mum and they find out she's alive, up until that point, I'm like, this is solid. This is good. Yeah. And then you find the mum and it's like, fucking hell, she's alive. Oh my God. Yeah. Dad is going to be in so much trouble. And you're like, good. I'm really glad. And then essentially for me, as soon as the outbreak happens at on the Isle of Dogs, at that point, I'm like,
yeah.
And it's a shame.
It's the horror, isn't it? It's maybe the horror that is... Maybe that's where we feel this is a director that is lacking a bit in giving us like the real tension and horror. Although, again, we get that in the opening scene, this is what's surprising about it, because that opening set piece with Robert Carlyle and his family is in that farmhouse is unbelievable.
So
I think.
Good.
It's one of the best set pieces across the whole trilogy, I would say.
Yeah.
So we can do that kind of tension and suspense and terror really well, but maybe it's too big a scale in the second half. Maybe it's too diluted or something. The fact that we have all of these military characters and this family, and we've got Robert Carlyle who's sort of transforming and infected, but sort of isn't as well.
So
right?
I don't really understand what happens with him.
No.
I remember we were texting while I was watching it. I was like, how? Is
he sort of half infected, or is he is he gradually turning? It's a difficult one, yeah.
I was like, how is Robert Carlyle essentially like the Michael Myers of zombies now? I was like, I don't understand how he's essentially invincible, keeps coming back, keeps finding his kids. Yeah. And I was texting you, I was like, it doesn't make any sense. And you said something like, well, is he actually like properly infected, or is it because he got it from his wife she's got this like immunity, and so it's not like he's actually got it from an actual infected.
I think so.
Which is fine, and that's a decent explanation. But for me, the movie did not signpost that clearly enough, and so I just found it quite frustrating. I was like, I don't understand how he keeps showing up.
What a cast, by the way, when you watch it now.
What a cast.
Robert Carlyle, Rose Byrne, Jeremy Renner, Harold Perrineau, Imogen Poots, Idris Elba. Unbelievable the amount of people that kept popping up on screen. And I was like, oh, it's them.
So good. Amazing, and right? Robert Carlyle is, I would say, probably the best thing about it. Like, he is unreal in this.
Absolutely.
I love Robert Carlyle.
What a guy. I love Robert Carlyle so much.
Idris Elba, don't really understand why you cast the most London man who's ever existed in a film that's set in London and make him do an American accent. Like,
well, it was weird, wasn't it? Because this was about the time of The Wire, and this was when Idris Elba did a lot of American stuff as well. But you're right, that is a weird... It's like the way in which 28 Days has Irish people playing Londoners, and it's like, well, just cast a Londoner,
like, you know? Jim's Irish. You can have 2 Irish people in a film. That's allowed. Anyway. But, and Imogen Poots, who I massively rate. I will basically... watch a film if Imogen Poots is in it. Like, she's that for me. I think she's really, really good. She's awful in this. Oh, bless her. And I don't think it's her fault. I don't know what's happened. Maybe she just doesn't have a lot to work. I don't really know. She has one facial expression throughout the entire thing. And I just kept thinking, Imogen, where are you, my love? Like, but she's very young at it. She grows into a much more accomplished actress, and I think she's remarkable, but this is not her strongest turn. But I will say the kids in the 28 franchise get better and better as the films go on.
Boy, do they. Yeah, that's true. It's true. Not to be mean about the young performances
Not
in
to
the
be
early
mean
movies,
about anybody.
but my God, they get better as they go on.
But they do get better. Yes, exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a weird little curio of a film now, because also it's sort of been ignored by Garland and Boyle as well. So they didn't get involved in this movie at the time they were filming Sunshine together, which, by the way, what a movie. I haven't seen. Oh my God, Becky, it's so good. We need to watch that together. It's so good.
Okay.
But obviously when they come back, and we'll talk about this in a minute with Years, they sort of ignore the sort of world-building developments that this movie introduced, right? This idea of the immunity, this idea of them getting out into mainland Europe at the end of the film, and all these other things, right? Kind of completely ignored and rewritten and retconned, essentially.
Right. Yeah, so it is interesting, isn't it, that actually even those guys kind of slightly pushed it to the side.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it is quite, I would say, recognisably the one that people are like, meh.
Yeah,
great opening sequence, and the rest of it's crap, is the kind of general discourse around this film.
I agree, and actually, I don't think it's crap. That's the thing. I think
don't either. And like I say, I was pleasantly surprised on this watch.
It's held to a high standard, and we get this with certain franchises where the films are really good, or generally the batting average is good, or the first movie's so brilliant that we might consider this movie pretty rubbish in comparison. But actually, it's a fairly fine zombie apocalypse movie.
It absolutely is. And it does have some really interesting stuff going for it.
Yeah.
I love... I had basically forgotten that it's basically like force majeure, right?
That is exactly what it is. The opening is where the dad leaves his family to die to save himself.
I had completely forgotten that.
Yeah.
And like the wife at the window, I am like... Who is this terrible man?
And that's really interesting, isn't it?
And what I found most interesting was actually, Mike, looking inside myself and trying to think about, all right, Becky, fine.
What would you do?
We're going to judge Robert Carlyle at this point, are we? Because I remember vividly about 5 minutes ago when she is running up the stairs to go and find that kid who has come out of nowhere and then does a stupid thing and runs up the stairs. You were going in your brain, well, what's she doing that for? Just get out of the house. Like, leave him. Leave the kid, obviously. And then Robert Carlyle comes up and he is literally, you basically see it because he's such an incredible actor, his face going, what do I do? Well, I can't get her. And I've got kids on the mainland, so I'm going to get out of here. Now, I don't think, actually, he is necessarily thinking I've got kids on the mainland. I'm not sure he's necessarily that, like, cognizant in that moment. I think he is following his fucking instincts to survive and get out of there. And I think he's an absolute prick for leaving his wife behind. And I would have been very cross if I was her as well. But I get it. Like, I would probably be running across that lawn towards that boat as well.
I would have liked, and you know me, I love I love force majeure. I love an awkward family drama / horror. And I think that's the thing for me, is that is the most interesting element of the film that is not really dealt with in that much of an interesting way in the second half of the film. You know?
I think you're right, because as I say, for me, it's when they find the mum, and I'm thinking...
yeah, exactly.
Oh, this is going to be awkward, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you sort of get it, and like certainly Imogen Poots is very cross with him.
Very cross.
And because he's told the kids that he saw the mum die, and he obviously didn't.
Yeah.
And so she's cross. Little boy is confused, and you get that brilliant bit with Robert Carlyle and his wife, like when she's on the gurney and she's had all the tests done and you find out actually she was bitten and so she's got this immunity, blah, 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 blah. And she, I think, says that she forgives him so that he'll come and kiss her because she basically wants to infect him. I think she's like, that's your punishment, actually.
Yeah.
But I think there was, like, that was almost too easy. Yeah. Like, I wanted more from that. Yeah. And it's after that the film dips, I think. Agreed. So there you go. It's an interesting film. Not bad by any means. No. But it is the forgotten. I mean, people, and I think, these days you could very easily just do a double bill of days and years and forget that this middle film ever existed, right? And we're used to that as horror fans with franchises. We've got like, oh, here comes a Halloween film that's forgotten the last 6 films and ignored them, or you can just pick your 3 Heather Langenkamp films in the Elm Street franchise, or you can, we all have this with horror franchises, don't we? Beautiful. Yeah, we're primed for it. Not a problem.
This episode is sponsored by Bring Her Back. This is one of my favourite horror films of the year. A brother and sister uncover a terrifying ritual at the secluded home of their new foster mother. The foster mother is played by Sally Hawkins in one of the best and scariest performances I've ever seen. The film kind of balances and juggles kind of hagsploitation movies like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. There's also a kind of fairy tale horror element to it. Reminds me a bit of Wes Craven cinema, like The People Under the Stairs. It's got incredible performances. It's got some of the most wince-inducing body horror and gore you've ever seen. And it is a real feel-bad movie, I'll be honest. You're not left on a high by the end of it. But if you like your horror movies slightly more hardcore, give Bring Her Back a watch. It's rated 18 and available to buy or rent from your favourite digital stores like Apple TV+, Amazon Prime and Sky Store. One more time, a huge thank you to this week's sponsor. That's Bring Her Back. So let's talk about years finally then, from earlier this year, 2025. Obviously so much, this is the other really interesting thing, I think, is that 28 Days Later kind of relaunched zombies into the mainstream. Mm-hmm. And if you think about everything we've had in the interim, from The Walking Dead TV show to Pontypool, The Girl with All the Gifts, to Shaun of the Dead and Zombieland, like kind of zombie comedies, to, One Cut of the Dead as well. Train to Busan. Like
amazing. Train to Busan.
100% 28 Days Later.
100%.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting because now the film has kind of got to live up to its own legacy, right? Like, what do you do at this point beyond this, right? So that's really interesting. So finally, let me start off just by asking you, what did you think of 28 Years Later? How did you find it?
I like it. I do like it. Mm-hmm. I think that it... in some ways, I think that it suffers, and you've kind of alluded to this, I think that it suffers some similar issues that the other 2 films do. I think it starts extremely strong. And I absolutely adore what these guys have done with the sort of like the multimedia elements of it. Like, that is so interesting. The use of music, the use of montage, that like Rudyard Kipling poem.
Oh my God. Terrifying.
Oh my
Boots.
God.
Yeah.
Boots.
Yeah.
I've had Boots stuck in my head basically since I watched that film. That is quite a disturbing thing to have stuck in your head.
It's
like,
horrible.
I would much prefer, like, I don't know, an earworm like Ace of Base or something. But no, I've got Boots by Rudyard Kipling being screamed in my subconscious from this film. So I think all of that, in the beginning section is beautiful. I think that they're using really interesting kind of cross subgenre stuff. There's elements of folk horror in here with like the community stuff. That really creepy mask that they have some people wearing.
Yeah, that's good.
Like, visually, all of that is amazing, and I think the use of cameras again, and I know that we'll come on to talk more specifically about what they've kind of done with cameras in terms of like filming this and trying to link that back to the first film and all of that. Yeah. But even that kind of like very jerky kind of bullet time,
that's right,
that they're using with the arrows, and it's interesting that all of that is very lo-fi sort of actually like literally within.
Danny Boyle worded it as Poundland bullet time, which I
brilliant.
Yeah.
But it's lo-fi even within the world of the film, right? Because they're bows and arrows and all of this kind of thing. That they're like you literally see them kind of hand making. I think that the premise of the causeway and this kind of this community that has managed to not only survive but thrive because of this sort of separation from the mainland that they've got. I think all of that is brilliant, and the way that they address the evolution of the infected themselves, and so you get like the slow-lows and you get the alphas and all of that. Brilliant. I did find that it petered again a little bit towards the end for me. I thought that it started stronger than it finished, but on the whole, I was a fan.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I've talked about the film before this year already, but I love it. I think it's brilliant. I think that it's almost... I would say it's almost perfect for me. I even like the way in which it shifts in the second half. Until the last 5 minutes. I think that was where it slightly lost me, but I didn't mind the more emotional stuff in the second half, actually. It's obviously, as a horror fan, I prefer the first half, definitely. But I actually think that, especially talking about it alongside 28 Days Later, where, like we said, it kind of slightly slows down in a less interesting way. I think this movie is at least slightly more interesting when we get to Ralph Fiennes and we get to that stuff. I
absolutely agree with that.
It's really unexpected and it's bold and interesting. I like where it goes.
I agree with that. And Ralph Fiennes, for me, is... I was going to say he's probably the best thing in it, but then I think about Jodie Comer, and then I think about the kid who plays Spike, and I'm like, actually, there are some really, really good performances in this film.
So that's interesting that you liked the second half less, then, considering it is all Ralph Fiennes, Jodie Comer, and the boy. Right?
Yeah, good point. Have I just massively contradicted myself? I think story wise and kind of pacing wise. For me, it petered in terms of just like the energy of it and kind of because what you do get is, again, you get a really interesting opening sequence, right? That is one thing that all three of these films fucking nail. And so you get this introduction to the character of Jimmy, who is
watching Teletubbies,
and this kind of, again, this like home invasion by the infected, right? So parents trying to protect their children, Jimmy, this little lad, kind of getting away. This really interesting kind of religious element that it introduces. And again, this is something that sort of is used and kind of like hinted at certain points, never really concentrated on, but just sort of hinted at certain points throughout the entire trilogy so far, is the way that religion will pick up an apocalypse. And in this instance, you've got Jimmy's dad, who is a clergyman of some ilk. And he seems to have completely lost it and gone off the deep end, and is sort of saying, come to me, my children, as the zombies or the infected all kind of come in through the windows. And then even to the point that Jimmy is then like sort of safe, and he's got his crucifix that his dad's given him. And he says literally like, Father, why have you forsaken me? Like there is this kind of, I don't know, it's like setting up this sort of very interesting... Like you
say, folk horror or something, isn't it?
Folk horror, religious horror, post-apocalyptic, all of this like cult kind of situation. So, that is very frenetic, and you've really got, again, that terror of the infected coming into a house and immediately turning all of the adults and, the blood spraying everywhere and all of that. And then it slows and kind of introduces you to the world that we're now inhabiting on the island with the new community. And I loved, again, almost a little bit like the Isle of Dogs section, where you're learning that world. You're starting to understand like how they live now. And I found all of that really interesting. Then I love it when Jamie and Spike go over to the mainland and they're doing the hunting. I love all of this stuff about like how they are teaching the next generation to survive. Yeah. And you see all that so interestingly through that dynamic between Jamie and Spike, and the way that he's just constantly like tutoring him, and how he's having to do that like literally like on the fly as they're sort of shooting arrows at these infected coming towards them. And then it changes, and you sort of get this much greater emphasis on like the mum and her illness, trying to find the doctor, and that kind of that mission that comes out of that whole situation. So for me, you know, like I guess as a horror fan, I do think that the first section was stronger. But that doesn't take away from any of the power and the performances of what we get in the second half.
There's something really interesting. I think Ben Travis said it to me on this podcast when we talked about the film. But, you know, he made a really interesting observation that it's like the first half is sort of about... It is very male, right? It's the father-son hunting trip. And then the second half switches to being it's about motherhood, about maternity.
Yeah, very much.
There's the childbirthing infected scene. There's... And everything... sort of softens, I suppose, compared to the first half as well. And I think, Alex Garland seems kind of obsessed with gender. And, you know, he's made a film literally called Men. He's made a lot of really interesting all-female films like Annihilation and this kind of stuff as well. He's made a lot of films about sort of toxic masculinity, like Ex Machina.
And even The Beach, you know, the kind of matriarchal society that they've got. Yeah,
really interesting. And I think he's definitely dabbling in that stuff in this film, which I find really interesting. And like, we've got to mention Brexit, haven't we? We've got to mention Brexit. I mean, again, like the subtext doesn't feel particularly subtle here. No. In that you've got... But again, this was kind of set up in the first film, which is what's so clever and prescient about it. But the UK has completely isolated itself from the rest of the world, and
/ being isolated by the rest of the world.
Isolated. And I suppose actually what you could look at as the little islands, the Holy Island, as a kind of more of a snapshot of Britain.
Absolutely.
Because they have cut themselves off. And there's this idea, and Alex Garland talked to me about this idea of, I think he also wanted to explore not Brexit necessarily overtly, but this obsession that people have at the moment, of the last 10 years, let's say, since Brexit, since Trump, with this idea of like nostalgia for the past, this idea that we want things to be back the way they were in the old days, or that things were better back then. And it's like, well, better for who? And this
better
weird...
for who? And when exactly?
When exactly, right? And I think he does. There is a lot of that in the imagery of this film, isn't there? The old Rudyard Kipling poem. It almost looks like you're in kind of wartime when there's that section when a lot of the women are preparing for the return of the men to come back. And they're like making tea and setting the tables. And there's like an old picture of Queen Elizabeth on the wall. And everything looks deliberately like we're going back about 50, 60 years, doesn't it? You know,
it does,
really
yeah. And there's something about even the clothes that they're wearing. Like, there are interesting little moments. Like Jamie is wearing a London Fire Brigade jacket. Yeah. So that's obviously kind of like scavenged stuff. Yeah. But otherwise, it's quite a sort of, I don't know, almost like pastoral existence, right? They're all in these sort of like, it looks like homespun wools that have been naturally dyed. And they're all in sort of like, the women are all in like, I don't know, like little tea dresses and stuff. Like it does.
Yeah, exactly.
It feels
like the sort of tabards. You know,
absolutely, yeah. And like, these sort of these soft florals, these earthy tones.
Yeah.
And it's actually something that you see at the end of 28 Days Later when Killian and Naomi and Megan, Hannah, are in their little farmhouse.
Yes.
And they have obviously immediately just raided all of the cupboards because they're all in these like wools and, you know, these cozy jumpers. I mean, I look at the end of that film and I'm like, I'm not sure I'd be signalling.
Having quite a nice little existence.
I'm all right, actually. Yeah. But it is on the island in 28 years later. And it is like, even when, Spike takes his mum over to the mainland, he's just got a big sack of apples.
Yeah.
You know, like it's stuff like that. Like it just feels very kind of back to the earth.
Absolutely. Like you said, it feels folk horror in that way, doesn't it? And again, folk horror is the other massive thing that has become a thing since 28 Days Later too, right? Like we've had a whole revival of folk horror. And again, Alex Garland has definitely dabbled in folk horror with men and things like that. So yeah, I love all of that stuff about it. I think it's really interesting. And again, that idea of the post-apocalyptic narrative of, okay, now that it's been 20 or 28 years since the apocalypse, what does the world look like now? And I think, like you say, just that world building in the first half is so interesting. And I think it's really interesting too when we get that sudden, quite jarring appearance of characters from outside of the UK. We get the Swedish guy who has like an iPhone, and there's suddenly introductions to pop culture and cosmetic surgery and like influencers.
My God,
that kind of thing.
That fucking bit where Spike is like, oh, there's a girl in our village who's like that. Like, she's allergic to shellfish.
Yeah.
Absolutely cackling. Like, I was slayed. Yeah. I thought that was so funny.
It was so good.
And it's like, talk about like out of the mouths of babes. Yeah. It's so funny. And like Eric's reaction, he's like, give me my phone back. Like, what are you talking about? She's gorgeous. And then it dies and he sort of throws it away and he just says something like, please don't hook up with Felix or something. Like, is he sort of like saying goodbye to the love of his life? Oh God.
Yeah. All those little touches are brilliant.
Happy Eater. Love it.
What?
Happy Eater.
What's that?
Like Little Chef, but Happy Eater.
I've never heard of Happy Eater.
You are kidding me.
No.
We're not aged that differently. How are you not aware of Happy Eater?
Happy Eater.
Okay, so Happy Eater.
I know Little Chef.
It's basically, it was like it was kind of the big rival to Little Chef, I suppose. So, you know...
I've just Google imaged it now. I do not recognise that at all. I must have never had one near me growing up.
That is absolutely hilarious. You used to go in, you used to get these amazing, like, little orange boiled sweet lollies as soon as you went in for the kids.
Yeah.
They were great. They were, like, orange on the outside and white on the inside with one of those, like, little pull-off cellophane things.
Yeah.
This is really funny because, a little aside, you and I had a little road trip up to one of our gigs recently. Yeah. And we were talking about like, oh no, let's not stop at that service station. Let's stop at the next one because that's got like a M&S or whatever. Yeah. And this was the same thing. It was like, oh no, don't stop at Little Chef. Let's go to Happy Eater.
Ah, it was like the better version.
So,
okay.
Well, and it probably wasn't, but it was like they were my particular favourite. You didn't get the little orange lollies at Little Chef.
Yeah.
So yeah, Happy Eater turning up is one of those really beautiful kind of just sort of like visual callbacks. Again, this idea of sort of nostalgia and kind of going back and these properties that are kind of trapped in time, like post-apocalypse. And it's amazing. There's something that pops up and it's like something's fallen. Oh, that's right. It's a shell garage. So, the S has fallen off. So actually it just says hell. Love all that.
Love it.
And again, there's one of the things that I loved so much about, the first film that we didn't really talk about is like all of the little nods. And again, this is about, watching a film as somebody from the UK that is set so specifically in the UK, is all of the references like, well, do you want a Pepsi or a Sprite or a Lilt? And he's like, well, have you got a Tango?
Yeah.
And, you know, Naomi Harris, when they're in the supermarket saying something like, I'd be happy if I never saw another chocolate bar in my life. And then she's like, well, except for Terry's chocolate orange. And I'm like, yes, Naomi, absolutely right decision. And then here you get like a really kind of like faded sign of like a big like Tango poster or something. I just, all of those little touches, I'm like, this is what I'm here for, you know, that like colour.
So good. And it is, I think particularly this film is so British, isn't it? Like, I've spoke to a couple of people in the US and Canada, like other podcasters, who really didn't enjoy this movie and get on with it. And I wonder if there's something really inherently British about this movie that doesn't translate as well. Like you say, the Happy Eater stuff, the Brexity themes, the look and whole vibe and flavour of this film is really, like you say, it brings us back to our childhoods, right? It's so
absolutely
interesting.
It is like, it's reference heavy, this film. Yeah. And I can understand why, for somebody who wasn't able to pick up on the majority of those references, I still can't believe you haven't heard of Happy Eater. Why that would feel like quite inaccessible.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the infected then and the way in which they have evolved, as you alluded to, because we don't just have the running infected anymore. Although, again, there are still, and I'm surprised at how frightening I still found it all these years later, with all the copycats we've seen since, of those shots of people running, you know, all like those amazing wide shots of people running across a hill, you know, over a hill towards us. Are still terrifying.
And they do it so well. And this is something like rewatching them, because I watched 28 Years Later before I like revisited 28 Days Later. So it was really nice actually to see the similarities in terms of things like, you know, how the infected move and stuff. They have that stock still and then they move. And it's like, oh my God, it gets me every single time.
So good. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. That stuff is unbelievable, but we also get these other types of infected, so we get the kind of big bloated slow moving ones as well, right? What do you think of those guys?
I love them so much. They're my favorites.
Big, you might like them.
Big chunky zombies. I am here for it. They're like, and there's that bit where they're killing them it's like the first time you see them, and Spike and Jamie have gone hunting, and so you know, they Spike gets his first kill, and then there's like another couple of them, and one of them's a lady one, so she's got big boobies. Yeah. And then you get like a little baby one, and he's the one that I really love, and I kind of want, he's the one that I'd have in the shed, like at the end of Shaun of the Dead, and I'd give him a PlayStation.
Little chunky baby zombie.
Absolutely. Protect him at all costs.
There is a great moment where in the second half, right, when Spike is looking after his mum but falls asleep, and there's the slow-moving, crawling one coming at them, right? It's good.
But again, cute, because you've seen it earlier where he's like eating worms, and then he crawls up and he tries to eat Spike's shoelace, and he doesn't like it, and he just sort of goes, nah. But yeah, it's good that, because, and then there's that split second where you're like, was it a dream? Was it a nightmare? And then you realise, no, like mum, like came to, right? Like she sort of came out of her confusion from her illness, basically put a fucking bag over its head and brained it on the side of a tomb. Like,
so good.
All right, Jodie Comer, so yes, good. Please.
And as you mentioned, you know, these zombies are not wearing clothes, and this of course makes sense in the world. It's
I know where this is going.
It's been 28 years, so what we're getting is a lot of naked infected everywhere, right? Which again makes absolute perfect sense. I feel like so many people have talked about this, right? About the fact that A, they're naked, B, we see lots of dicks swinging about, and then of course we are introduced to Samson the alpha infected with the most distractingly big zombie dong we've ever seen.
I mean, right? It's easily the biggest zombie dong I've ever seen. Like, yeah, there's no competition. It is distractingly big. Like I'm sure you'll tell the listeners in a moment how that was achieved. The way it moves, like, it is just because obviously he's an infected, and so he's running after people in a rage-fueled nutcase. Fucking, you know, and it's just everywhere. Like, it's just everywhere, this thing.
It's so funny the way, and sometimes the cameras angled in the way where it's just like coming at us. It's like swinging towards us, right? And again,
you and Brad on our Fresh Blood podcast described it so well, where you were like ducking, like on screen.
I was on the front
trying to
row.
avoid it.
Yeah, I was on the front row at the screening I was at, and I was like, Jesus Christ. And again, I wonder what's some of Alex Garland's traumas, you know? Because I think about men, and do you remember the naked Rory Kinnear one who has the massive dick swinging about as well? You know, there's something that is inherently frightening to Alex Garland about these sorts of images, I think. But anyway, that's for another conversation. And it's so funny, and of course, because they they probably couldn't find loads of extras maybe willing to do this naked, but also for reasons of child protection and the fact that they were filming with minors. Yeah. None of the naked bodies are real, so they had to create all of these prosthetic boobs and dicks and all of these other things for these infected to wear the whole time, which is amazing. So again, that dick was deliberately designed to look
deliberately
like that.
Big.
Yeah.
I know that this is slightly crass, but you invited me on, so what do you expect? I want to know how big Samson's cock actually is in real life.
Probably
just
pretty
because
big.
That's exactly what I think. Because, do you need the prosthetic to be a particular size to cover the real thing?
Right.
Is the point that I'm trying to make. So were they just like, let's make it as big as possible because that will be hilarious? Or was it like a more kind of practical, logistical decision is what I'm obviously alluded to?
Samson he had like Jason Momoa vibes.
Big time. He's great. That fucking bit along the cause. Wait, no, that's a different alpha. Is it?
Oh, is it a different alpha? No, I don't know if it is, actually.
No, maybe he survives the enormous fiery arrow to the chest, actually, which is crazy. But that bit, which we haven't really talked about, that chase over the causeway, Jesus Christ.
Unbelievable. Let's talk about the cinematography, because again, you kind of briefly mentioned it, but a brilliant update on the original style of this movie, in that, once again, Danny Boyle used cheap, portable kind of means of filming, and everything was shot on location in the northeast of England. And Danny Boyle was very adamant about not disturbing the natural world or like the wildlife too much. And so again, he didn't want to come in with giant rigs and trailers and all of that kind of stuff. And so everything was filmed on like iPhones, basically, right? And they came up with these kind of clever rigs with multiple iPhones where you could get different kind of, like you said, a kind of bullet time angles that kind of spin 360 around people and everything. But just, again, I understand some people, I've heard some people be negative about this movie, Danny Boyle's direction being almost too much, like montages, archive footage, weird kind of red infrared kind of cinematography at times, and there's a lot going on. I understand that. For me, it all makes up this incredible tapestry of building this world.
100% agree. I loved it.
Yeah, I love it so much. But I love Danny Boyle's direction in that way anyway. But I think you're right. That causeway scene where they're being chased across the causeway by the Alpha is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life.
It's absolutely remarkable.
Yeah.
Like, for a sequence to be so breathtakingly beautiful to look at, and yet at the same time my stomach was in my throat the entire run across, as they sort of get down there and they're like, it's fine, we've the water's kind of low enough that we can get over, and they're kind of like, little sort of arm punches, like, oh, that was fun, wasn't it? First kill, son. And then you get the birds. And again, this is a recurring motif, this idea of sort of animals like running away from the infected, right? You get that in the rats. That terrifying fucking tunnel sequence in the first film with the rats. And so here you get the birds, and that's their kind of like alarm almost that this Alpha is coming across behind them. But you don't have to do that against the Northern Lights. No. You don't have to.
No.
But we're gonna. It's going to look absolutely stunning. And the music swells. And that sort of run where, Spike is falling. His dad's trying to get him. The Alpha is coming up absolute pace behind them, like so fast, and your brain is kind of looking at the distance between them, and you're going, they're not going to make this.
No.
They are absolutely not going to make this. And then you kind of add in, obviously, the kind of fort, I guess, kind of like getting involved, the archers, and it's a bit like the like T-1000, right? So every time like a bullet or a arrow like hits it, it kind of knocks him back and makes him stop for a moment, but then he just keeps coming. Nothing's taking him down until they like fire that sort of big fiery one into his chest, and he finally like stops and topples. But even before he does that, Jamie literally says to Spike, like, this is it, Jamie. Like, basically, prepare yourself. We're about to die.
Yeah.
And then they don't, and it's so thrilling. And then you like smash cut into the party, and again, it's very kind of like pastoral and sort of like folk horror-y with fiddles and like accordions and, you know, sort of spinning around on the dance floor and people chugging ale. And I'm like, yes, please, more of this.
Yeah, please. Absolutely. I agree. Alfie Williams as Spike, right? Like, unbelievable. I'm assuming he is going, and we're going to finish on this in a moment, but this is the first in a trilogy, obviously. I'm assuming we're going to follow Spike throughout. That's the impression that I get from the end of this movie, right? Unbelievable. What a revelation as an actor.
So good.
Yeah.
He's so still. Like, because he's 12 in this, right? So, I don't know a lot of 12-year-olds, but they're quite, from my memory of being a 12-year-old, they're quite hyper. But obviously, like, I guess because of his lifestyle, you know, again, it's kind of contrasted with, like, the Teletubbies existence of pre-apocalypse to kind of now. And, you know, there isn't any of that stuff. He doesn't know what an iPhone is. He doesn't know what the internet is. He doesn't know what a delivery driver is.
Right.
Like, this is somebody who's never ordered himself, you know, a Nando's or whatever and got it sort of biked round. Like, and he really embodies that stillness of a child, almost from a bygone era.
Yeah.
But
totally.
kind of transplanted into the 2020s. Like, it's remarkable that he's kind of managed to embody that. And then, you know, the way that he plays fear, the way that he plays guilt, the way that he plays sort of sympathy or silliness or whatever. Like, he seems to have arrived like fully formed. He's remarkable.
And it's so nice to see he's, you know, Newcastle kid. I don't know, there's something nice about not seeing a child actor that looks like they've been born and bred in London and trained at Sylvia Young Drama School from the age dot. You know, like he just feels like this very normal everyday kid as well.
Absolutely.
I suppose in a similar way to the way in which Jamie Bell did back when he played Billy Elliot, actually.
True. That's a really
vibe.
Good comparison, 100%.
But he's brilliant. I can't wait. And again, I guess that's the thing about this film is that it's kind of weirdly sectioned and episodic, and some people might accuse it of being a bit uneven, but I guess the overall journey is Spike's journey kind of childhood to manhood, I guess, if you want to put it in a really broad strokes way. It's him gaining that independence, and by the end of the movie he's going off on his own, isn't he? You know, on his own little journey. And like and obviously there's that moment where at the beginning of the film he wasn't able to actually kill the infected or get a headshot, and then by the end he gets his headshot, doesn't he, as well?
That's right. And you know what the earlier portions of this film are doing is they are giving Spike the skills that he needs to then, by the end of the film, go out on his own and then survive kind of into the sequels, you know? Like, you need if you're going to have a movie and a sequence of a series of films that are going to follow a character who basically starts at like 12 years old, you need to make that believable, that actually you watch him develop and have these skills like instilled in him by the people around him. And he's kind of getting that practically from Jamie, but he's also getting that emotionally from his mum. He gets parts of it almost from Dr. Kelson as well, like this sort of I don't know, this like wider understanding of death and kind of making death, especially in the sort of world that he is going to be exposed to on the mainland now that he is out of his little community. If he's going to be out on his own, he's going to have to deal with this concept of like memento mori, right? Like life, like death is a thing and you must live with death.
Yes.
And so all of those elements just seem to like work out so well to get us to this point where he's sort of off on his own at the end of the film. And you're like, yeah, I believe that he could at least survive to the end of the credits, you know? For
sure. Yeah. And I love that. And again, like we should wrap things up in a minute, but I guess the fact that the next movie is going to be called Bone Temple, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's talk about the whole Bone Temple section of this movie, which I'm guessing is going to be important to the next film too, right? Like the way in which this movie becomes so much more pensive and still and emotional, and you know, we find out that his mum, played by Jodie Comer, has cancer, and then Ralph Fiennes has to basically kill her in a kind of peaceful way, and then and then Spike putting her skull onto that temple and everything as well. It's quite devastating, isn't it?
It's
that stuff
absolutely devastating.
Yeah.
I had a little bit of an issue with the way that it was all done a little light touch and neatly. I know that we've already been led to believe that Spike is a strong kid and he's been through a lot, but like,
yeah,
I don't know that he
gets over that pretty quickly.
He gets over it pretty quick. You know, I'm sure there's going to be some lasting trauma, but in terms of what we actually get to see on screen, I'm not sure. So yeah, that sort of stuck in my teeth a little bit, but otherwise, I do think it's really beautifully handled. I like this idea of, you know, there wouldn't be any treatment for the mum and her condition, even in like our world, right? Because it's metastasized, it's so far gone. But at least there would be kind of palliative care. Yeah. Whereas obviously in the sort of world that they're in, that isn't an option. No. You know, I imagine that Kelson has got a very limited supply of morphine and all of that kind of thing. And there just isn't the setup to kind of make her comfortable, all of that. So I like the idea of, and again, it harks back to Hannah in the first film, this idea that they drug Spike. Yeah. To make it easier for him to deal with losing his mum. And
also happened to Jim's parents too, right? As in, like, he discovers them in their bed and they gave themselves a kind of peaceful death in the midst of this apocalypse, didn't they? Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
God, that fucking note they leave him.
Oh, it's horrible, yeah. I know, yeah.
So yeah, like I really like all this stuff. I don't know. I'd have
feelings. It gets very feelingsy, doesn't it?
Yeah. More blood and swinging dicks, please.
Yeah. And then, of course, we get the coda, where Jimmy, who we're introduced to in the opening scene watching Teletubbies as a child and who, you know, whose dad may be some sort of religious maniac, suddenly is revealed, now played by Jack O'Connell as a grown-up, dressed as Jimmy Savile, with a whole gang of other people all called Jimmy, also dressed as Jimmy Savile, who all kind of...
Are they also all called Jimmy?
Yeah, when you look at them in the credits, they're like Jimmy something, like with like little nicknames. So they sort of pounce on Spike, and that's sort of where the movie ends, right? So very much kind of set up. I mean, like, they knew obviously this was going to be the first of a trilogy here, so it's got that very much like kind of Marvel-esque kind of storytelling where it's like, okay, we're going to give you the little setup for the next movie. How did you find that quite I find it a bit jarring, especially after the moving second half of the film. I kind of wish they had not bothered with that personally, you know?
Absolutely fucking bonkers. I mean, the tonal whiplash I got from this was a lot.
Yeah. Should it have been post-credits, do you think?
I would have maybe put it post-credits, or I'd have used it as the incredible opening scene to the next film.
Exactly.
Because we know they always have them. So...
Yeah. Agreed.
You know, have fucking nunchuck Jimmy Savile turn up at that point.
And again, the Jimmy Savile thing, which I know confused so many people. And again, really funny hearing Americans podcasts being like, there's this guy called Jimmy Savile. But...
yeah, there's a Netflix documentary. Give it a watch.
Exactly. I asked Alex Garland, obviously, about this, and he talked about... he didn't really mention Jimmy Savile specifically, but he talked about how this character of Jimmy, who I'm assuming we're going to spend a lot more time with in the next film, all of his points of reference are from when he was like 9 years old or earlier, right? Because the world ended for him when he was a kid. So I think there's something quite important about the fact that when his home invasion happens, he's watching TV and he's watching the Teletubbies. That's a kind of hint to say, like, everything in his brain is going to be a weird mashup and weird distorted memory of stuff he saw on the telly as a young child, essentially. And I think that's the world we're going to be introduced to in the next movie. So we're going to see a bit of Jimmy Savile, because obviously 2002, when this apocalypse happened, Jimmy Savile never got exposed to being a paedophile, right? So he's going to dress up as that guy from that TV show he likes, you know?
Dude, in itself, like, even leaves...
yeah.
It's provocative. That leaves a bit of a sour taste.
I know, I kind of like it.
Fuck. I know. But also, logistically, where did they all get their immaculate velour tracksuits from?
I guess we'll find out, yeah.
I hope we'll find out, because otherwise I'm like, well, if they could all find immaculate velour tracksuits, why couldn't they all make themselves Teletubby outfits? And why haven't we got, like, Tinky Winky and Poe nunchucking and parkouring all over the place?
I hope we get
zombies.
that in the next movie.
I would be so happy if we, like, get back to Jimmy's lair, and it's like there's like the Jimmies, and then there's like the Teletubbies,
amazing.
And then there's the Brats.
And then there's like somebody dressed as Neil Buchanan from Art Attack. Like, I'm trying to think
amazing.
of like 90s kid references, right?
Yeah,
amazing.
like Ed the Duck and Gordon the Gopher are there. Zig and Zag.
Exactly, Zig and Zag. Oh my God. Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yes, please.
Oh my God. And this is the other really weird thing about this. In the most British kind of franchise of all time, and the most British of endings, Jimmy Savile, right, in the northeast of England. The next movie, Bone Temple, is being directed by Nia DaCosta.
Uh-huh.
Now, I think she's a brilliant director. And you know, and I can't wait to see what she does with it. But what are your thoughts on this? What are your expectations and thoughts and hopes and dreams for Bone Temple?
Let's just say that I hope that she's getting a number of, like, briefing one-pagers about... some of this British shit that she is about to have to contend with.
So there was this guy called Tony Hart, and he had this model called Moore.
His best mate was made out of plasticine. That's all you need to know. Like, literally, like, we need to put together the best, like, YouTube playlist for Nia DaCosta.
Yes,
what a fun job. Do you know what? I'm really excited. I think that the end of this film was as bonkers as it could have possibly gotten. If we were having this conversation 12 months ago and you said, what are you expecting from 28 years later? A Jimmy Savile nunchuck reference was not going to be what was, like, on my bingo card. So who knows what's coming next? I have no idea. But I think Nia DaCosta is a remarkable director. I've really, really enjoyed Candyman, and I think that, if anything, that film in particular shows that she has the chops to kind of pick up an existing property and do something really interesting and smart and fresh, but kind of referential and respectful at the same time. So yeah, like, I think she is an incredibly interesting choice, based on exactly, you know, what we've just said in terms of, like, the actual subject matter. But as a director, I think she's probably an extremely safe pair of hands.
I agree. I'm really excited. She's a very artful director as well. Very much so. I mean, she was an artist and painter before she was a filmmaker. And I'm going to trust in Danny Boyle and Alex Garland in the fact that getting an American director in to direct this next film is a deliberate and interesting choice. And I want to see more of this world. Like, what I'm hoping now is, and I wonder if it's going to slowly shift away from horror, from zombie horror too. Like, I almost get the impression from that ending that we're going to be in a kind of Mad Max world, you know, like gangs in weird, outlandish costumes, cranked up to 11 in terms of performances and tone. I wonder if Spike is going to explore more of mainland England, and we are going to discover gangs and weirdness and just like at this kind of post-apocalyptic kind of just mad hellscape, you know? Yeah.
Although saying what you say about kind of moving away from horror, like one of the things that I loved so much about Nia DaCosta's Candyman was how fucking scary it was. Like, you know, there are some... And again, her being sort of so artful, there are some shots, like when you get it kind of like that amazing shot in Candyman where it like pulls back from the window and you just see kind of what's happening inside, like through the window from such a distance. And that makes it even more terrifying than if you were kind of more sort of up close and personal with it. Like, I hope that she's kind of going to employ some of those really like interesting choices around kind of crafting the scares. So, you know, we've said how scary it is in terms of just the infected themselves, but I think what would be really nice is where else from this post-apocalyptic world can she like pull the horror from?
Yeah, exactly. God, do you remember that beautiful end sequence of Candyman with the kind of shadow puppets that depicted like every generation's Candyman? So good.
Remarkable stuff.
Remarkable, beautiful. I'm really excited. I think that Alex Garland has a story in his head, and I think he's not interested in telling the same story over and over again in this franchise, right? So I think we are going to go in weird new directions, and I've got a feeling the next movie will be divisive. I've got a feeling some horror fans might not like it. So, like, I can imagine it's going to be bold and weird and different to the previous film. But I'm like, give me
absolutely,
it.
Gimme.
You know?
I want more.
We're always going to have 28 days later if we want to watch scary zombies, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want more, like, weird folk horror shit.
Yeah.
I'm one of the things that I'm most frustrated about at the end of 28 years later is I'm like, but what's the mask? I want to know what that weird fucking mask is.
Yeah.
So I hope we find out about that, please.
Yep.
More kind of like weird Alex Garland men style folk horror.
Yeah.
I would love it if at some point over the next couple of movies, it almost goes full circle, and especially talking about Alex Garland's interest in the more sort of like sci-fi side of genre cinema is obviously this whole thing started with like labs and animals being experimented on, and then you kind of get to that a little bit by the end of the first film with the soldier who is chained up by the soldiers, but like in the compound, and then obviously in the second one you've got kind of the immunity, which is this interesting kind of like experimental thing that they want to look into. But I feel like what we haven't really done yet is almost done that full circle where you have actually got like a study into this thing. And like, maybe you find like a kind of, I don't know, a cult or an old, because like obviously, Ralph Fiennes was like he was a sort of GP. So
that's right.
Is there somebody who's survived who was like a biologist or something who has sort of like squirreled themselves away, like trying to find a cure? I don't know. Like, I just feel like there's so much interesting stuff sort of even on those sort of like two really like opposing sides of things, like the pastoral kind of folky horror side of things, and then like the sci-fi kind of like, you know, again, this sort of like leaning into like, well,
this was a man-made virus.
Exactly. So where's, you know, what's the kind of the end point of that? So like so much exciting stuff. And I think that Alex Garland is such a perfect pair of hands to be dealing with like both of those kind of aspects going forward if he does.
Completely. And, you know, Jacko, Aaron Taylor-Johnson was great, and Jodie Comer was brilliant in this as well.
Both superb. I thought Jodie Comer particularly was remarkable.
Unbelievable. Aaron Taylor-Johnson is credited in the next film, so he's, I'm guessing, coming back.
Yeah,
and of course, Jack O'Connell, I'm assuming, stepping into more of a starring role as well, and he's always amazing. I mean, Sinners, still my favourite film of the year. he was unbelievable in Sinners, and I'm glad to see him back in more horror films. You know, it's great. Yeah,
absolutely. And he looks great in a tiara. So
he does. Oh, and Cillian Murphy. So
right,
Cillian Murphy is. I mean, Danny Boyle has confirmed it. He said it to me in an interview. He's like, he is coming back. He's credited in the Wikipedia page with the Bone Temple as being in it. What do you think? What do you think of bringing Jim back, and where would you like Jim to be in his life 28 years later?
I'm excited for it. I was a fan of Jim, so yes. I think it'd be wasteful almost to not. Also, Cillian Murphy is fucking incredible. Absolutely. So anything that he's in, you know, absolutely. So yeah, I think it's the right decision. What I wanted to ask you earlier when you mentioned him was, so you know the like weird emaciated infected in this one that starts
that everyone thought was Cillian Murphy, right?
But, yeah, I mean, everybody thought it was Cillian Murphy because he looks like Cillian Murphy. Like, it's not like people were kind of bringing that out of nowhere, right? So was that a little? I guess
it looks a bit like him. Yeah, maybe it was.
I mean, as much as Cillian Murphy would look if he was, you know, 28 years into being an infected person, I suppose. Like,
it was a kind of like the machinist version of Cillian Murphy.
Right. I'm not saying it's a flattering comparison. What I'm saying is that when that trailer and those images got released, it's not surprising that people thought that was Jim, right? That he had we see him as an infected, and that's your kind of like little nod to it or whatever.
Danny Boyle thought that was hilarious. He was like, I don't know why everyone thought that was him. He didn't like even acknowledge it, you know.
I don't know if I believe him. I think there's a possibility that was a hilarious little smirky troll at the rest of us. But I'm very glad that wasn't the last that we see of him, if that was going to be Jim. So yeah, I'm excited to see Cillian Murphy back. I liked the character. Obviously, as I've said, he's an incredible actor. So yeah.
Yeah. So the 28 years later made loads of money. For a 60 million budget, it made 150 million. We're only getting a third film in this trilogy if the Bone Temple does well as well. So they had already filmed the Bone Temple by the time the first film came out, but they haven't filmed the third one, and it is dependent on the financial success apparently of this movie. So
interesting.
Let's all buy lots of tickets because I'll be really cross if this ended on a cliffhanger and then we never get a third movie because this one was unsuccessful.
So cross.
Yeah, exactly. Oh God. So there you go. Well, I'm excited. So I'm sure me and you will report back. We'll discuss it on Fresh Blood and maybe elsewhere when the next movie comes out, Becky. I can't wait. I'm excited.
I can't wait. No, I'm going to be there, definitely. Like front of the queue. I'm really excited.
Finish with your rank. I probably know what this is, but finish with your rankings of the trilogy so far.
1, 3, 2.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. Right there with you. But it's not. There's not much in it between 1 and 3 for me.
There's not much in it.
They're very close. Yeah.
And actually, that sort of gap tightened slightly on my rewatch of 1, which, as I say, just didn't quite live up to my memory quite.
Yeah.
And my rewatch of Years, which I enjoyed more. So that gap sort of slightly closed.
I completely agree with that. I think this is something that Brad said when we discussed it on Fresh Blood on Patreon too. He said, like, the more I think about this film, the more it's gone up in my estimation. And I think that's true. I think the more I think about 28 Years Later and all the ideas that it's juggling, I like it more and more, you know?
I agree.
Yeah, so there you go. Amazing.
Yeah, so excited.
So excited. Well, Becky, thank you. Thank you so much for this. This has been such a fun chat. And just remind people, you'll be back on the podcast again soon, but until then, remind people where they can find Becky Dark.
Thank you. The local Happy Eater is the best place to find me.
Never heard of it.
Sucking on all of those lollies, which will definitely, because they were just like very, very hard sugar. So they'll have absolutely survived the apocalypse in their little cellophane wrappers. You can email me at bunnydark@gmail.com if you want to talk to me about Happy Eater. I am on socials at bunnydark, or you can find me on Patreon, patreon.com/bunnydark.
Amazing. Becky, thank you very much.
Thanks, mate.
And that's it for our 28 days/weeks/years bonus special. Thank you all so much for listening. Don't forget, 28 Days Later and 28 Years Later are both available to buy and watch at home. Give them a watch in preparation for Bone Temple early next year. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll be back on Friday for another regular episode of The Evolution of Horror.